Welcome back to the project Lakutas Siches. We will be learning today Lakutas Siches Chelek Tezvav, volume 15, the first Sicha for Pashas Vayeira, which is the Sicha on a Rashi. It's a rather unusual Pirush Rashi because Rashi discusses the nekudos, the dots on top of the letters of a word in a Sefer Torah. And he explains what the function of those dots is. And the Rebbe explains how, according to that, Rashi understands the pshat in the posuk. So that leads us into some interesting directions, which are not the typical sticha on a Rashi. The Rashi is in Perek Yud Ches, Postuk Tes, chapter 18, Postuk 9. And the Rashi is in two parts. The Rebbe will bring the first part of the Rashi, discuss it, and ask questions. And then he brings the second part and asks another couple of questions. The Postuk says that when the three visitors came to Avraham, those three visitors who subsequently turned out to be Malachim, when they came to Avraham and he served them, afterwards they said, Vayoimru Elov, they said to him, Aye Sora Ishtecho, where is your wife Sora? So Rashi quotes from the Posuk, Vayoimru Elov, they said to him, the word Elov has dots on 3 out of the 4 letters. Elov is 4 letters, Aleph, Lamed, Yud, Vov, and out of those 4 letters, the 3 letters, Aleph, Yud, Lamed, have dots over them. So Rashi explains that there's a dot over the letters Aleph, Yud, Vov in the word Elov, which form a word in itself. It means Ayoi. Where is he? Says Rashi, Reb Shimon ben Elazar taught that wherever you have a dotted word, then if the dotted letters are the majority, then you expound them. If the undotted letters are the majority, then you expound those. Over here, where the majority, 3 out of 4 letters are dotted, so we expound the dotted letters as though it were written Ayoi, where is he? And that teaches us that in addition to asking Avraham, where is your wife Sora, they asked her, where is he? Where is Avraham? And that teaches us that when a person comes to stay at a host, he should inquire of the husband about the wife and of the wife about the husband. That's the first part of the Rashi. Says the Rebbe, there are 4 questions here. Number 1, why does Rashi bring in his citation from the Posuk, why does he bring also the word Vayoimru? He doesn't seem to be explaining the word Vayoimru, and they said, he's explaining the word Elov. So that's all he should have brought from the Posuk. Number 2, Rashi brings that this interpretation about the dots on the letters was said by Reb Shimon ben Elazar. Rashi is not in the habit of bringing the authors of the statements of the Gemara or the Medrash, which he incorporates into his commentary, he doesn't usually quote the names. Why here? Why is it relevant? In other words, what greater explanation do we have for this idea that a person should inquire of the host about the hostess and the hostess about the host? Why do we know it better? Because it was said by Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. The third question is about the rule in general that wherever the dotted letters are the majority, we expound them, and wherever the undotted letters are the majority, we expound them. So why should that be? If you want to, for example, in our word, Elov, if you want to expound the letters Aleph, Yud, Vav as Ayoy, all you need to do is dot the Lamed, being that the Lamed would then be the minority. You would then expound the undotted letters Aleph, Yud, Vav, which are Ayoy. Why dot the majority? Fourthly, in addition to the difficulties in the Rashi on the spot, there's also a conflict here with the Rashi later on. In the story, in our parsha, the story of Lloyd escaping from the city of Sodom, which was overturned and destroyed by Hashem through his angels, it said that Lloyd took refuge in a cave. His daughters didn't know whether there's anyone else left out in the outside world to continue the human race. They thought everything was destroyed. So in order to continue humanity, they got their father Lloyd drunk, they slept with him, and indeed both of them conceived and gave birth to children from their father Lloyd. Now, the way they got their father drunk was the first night the elder sister gave her father wine to drink and then slept with him. The next night, the younger sister. Now, when the Torah relates about the elder sister the first night, the Pasuk says that Lloyd lo yoda b'shichvo uvekumo. He didn't know when she lay next to him and when she got up. Says Rashi, the word uvekumo and when she got up are dotted. And that tells us that he did know when she got up. He was aware. He was already coming back to himself. That's the Rashi there. So we see from that Rashi that the letters in a word, the dotted letters in a word, come to uproot that word, seemingly as though it were not there, as though the word uvekuma, and when she got up, he didn't know when she got up. It's as though the word wasn't there. So how can Rashi say over here that when you have a majority of dotted letters, you expound those letters so the word is definitely there? That's all about the first part of the Rashi. Rashi continues that in Bava Metzia, in Tractate Bava Metzia in Gemara, they say that the angel knew where Soras was, but they wanted to make a point of the fact that she's a tznuah, she's modest. She doesn't parade around. She's in the tent. And why did they want to make a point of it? In order to endear Sarah to her husband Avraham Avinu. And Rashi continues, said Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina, that they asked where she is in order to send her a kois shel brocha. A kois shel brocha is the cup over which a brocha was said, usually the brocha of Birkas Hamazon, the blessing after meals. So after the benching over a cup, you send the cup of brocha to the household. In this case, they wanted to send the kois shel brocha to Soras, so they asked Avraham Avinu, where is Soras? That's the end of the Rashi. Now here the Rebbe has 7 questions. First of all, it says that they knew where she was, but they wanted to endear her to Avraham. That doesn't explain the point that Rashi raises at the beginning, which is that the word is dotted, the 3 letters Aleph Yud Vav are dotted. That explains the words in the Pasuk, Aye Sora Ishtecha, where is Sora? So Rashi should have written that in a new section, in a new comment, citing the words, Aye Sora Ishtecha, where is your wife Sora? And not as though it were flowing from his previous point, by Yoimro Elov, and they said to him, and Rashi points out that the 3 letters Aleph Yud Vav are dotted. There's no flow. And the question is even stronger. When the Rashi brings from Bava Metzia that they asked where Sora is in order to endear her to Avraham, that actually conflicts with the earlier comment that they asked Sora about Avraham. And that's not so that modest. They're engaging with her. So how does Rashi bring both pirush and both comments in one flow? Second, why is it important for Rashi to point out that this pirush is written in Bava Metzia? Rashi doesn't usually point out his sources. Third, why does Rashi point out that the author of this statement that they wanted to send Soras a kois shel brocha was Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina? How is that relevant? How does that add explanation? Fourth, why in fact did the Malachim, the angels, send to Soras from their kois shel brocha? Why not have Soras partake of the kois shel brocha of her own husband? Fifth, Rashi says here 3 different reasons about why the Malachim inquired about Soras. 1, in order to inquire of the host about the hostess. 2, in order to make a point of her modesty. 3, in order to send to her the kois shel brocha. Why is it important to have 3 reasons for the same point? Sixth, even more, Rashi already said before that one of the points for which, one of the reasons that they came to Avraham was in order to inform Soras the tidings that she would conceive from Avraham and give birth. So we understand why they wanted to know where Soras is, why they wanted to engage with her, to share this good news. So why does Rashi look for any reason why they're asking Avraham about Soras? Seventh, the three reasons that Rashi brings are all separate reasons. They are not connected to each other. Why does Rashi write them all in one flow without saying, as he usually does, Dovor Acher, another point, another explanation, or some similar expression, which would divide the three up each from another? And the question is even stronger because in the source which Rashi is quoting, namely the Gemara Bava Metzia, it indeed says that they asked about Soras in order to make a point of her modesty. Rabbi Yosi bar Chanina Omar, but Rabbi Yosi bar Chanina said that it was in order to send her a koshel brocha. Now that kind of construction, first the name of the stage and then what he said, indicates that he's arguing on the earlier opinion, where it says, quote, Omar Pliny said so and so, and he then quote him, then it just means that he said the following statement. It doesn't necessarily indicate an argument, but where you quote an opinion of one person, and then you say that so-and-so says, that indicates that the second person argues on the first. So it comes out that the two reasons, one, that they asked to point out her modesty, and two, that they asked in order to send her a koshel brocha, are conflicting reasons. Yet Rashi brings them all as though they were all one flow. The Rabbi explains that in fact the catalyst for Rashi's comment is indeed that word Vayeimru. They said to Avraham, where is Torah? Why they? It would seem that the reason they asked about Torah altogether is, that we learned before, in order to tell her the good tidings that she would have a child. But for that, one malach was sent on that mission, as Rashi said earlier in the parsha. So why are they asking Avraham about Soras? Why the plural? And now we understand why Rashi cites from the pasuk the word Vayoimru, and they said, because that's what forcing Rashi to look for another reason why they're asking about Soras. Without that Vayoimru, without that plural, Rashi would have understood simply that they're asking about Soras in order to tell her the good news. But because it said Vayoimru plural, and there would only be one malach who was sent to inform Soras of the good tidings, so why are they asking about her? That's what pushes Rashi to look for another reason. And that's why Rashi cites it in the keppel, in the heading of his Pirush. And that's why Rashi answers that from this we learn that one should inquire of the host about the hostess and the hostess about the host. Since all the Malochim asked, where is Torah? So it wasn't just in order to share the good news, but because one is supposed to ask the host about the hostess. So everybody did what they're supposed to. And since the word Vayoimru proves that we're meant to inquire of the host about the hostess, which is the same reason why one should ask the hostess about the host. Therefore, we understand that they indeed asked Soras as well about Avraham, Where do we see that in the Pasuk? The Pasuk doesn't seem to say that they inquired of Sora about Avram. Says Rashi that hinted at is alluded to by the dots on top of the three letters in the word Elov, Aleph, Yud, Vav, we spell Ayoy. And this is why Rashi gets into the issue of the dots on the letters. Normally, Rashi doesn't explain dots. Rashi often, I should say, does not find it necessary to explain the dots because in Pshuta Shel Mikra, in the simple reading of the word, it doesn't feature. The dots don't feature. Why over here does he find it necessary to explain the dots? Because that explains the other half of the statement that Rashi uses to explain why they asked about Soras. Why is that? Because that's the practice. When you come to a host, you inquire about the hostess. But the other half of that is that you inquire of the hostess about the host. But where is that in the Pasuk? Says Rashi, it's alluded to in the dots. But this leaves us with a difficulty because when it says that you should inquire of the host about the hostess, it means, how is your wife? How is she doing? How's Mrs. So-and-so? It's totally irrelevant exactly where she is. So if they're asking about her as a matter of etiquette, of inquiring after the welfare of the hostess, why are they asking where she is? So there must be something important about her location. That's why Rashi continues with the second section of his comment, that in Bava Metzia it says that they wanted to make a point of the fact that she's in the tent in order to point out her modesty so as to endear her to Avraham Avinu. And then the other point why it was important where she is exactly is because they want to send the kosher bracha. And parenthetically, says the Rebbe, by bringing that they wanted to point out her modesty, Rashi is, by the way, answering another question. When you have dots on top of letters in a word, it indicates that the meaning of this word here with the dots is different from the usual meaning of that word. For example, when Rashi talks about the encounter between Yaakov Avinu and his brother Esav after Yaakov was away for 20 years, he had run away because Esav wanted to kill him, because Esav felt that Yaakov had stolen the blessings from him, so Yaakov runs away. He stays away for 20 years. He's finally coming home, and Esav meets him, and instead of the enmity that Yaakov thought that Esav still harbored, the Pasuk said, Vayishokeu. He kissed him, Esav kissed him. And the word Vayishokeu and he kissed him has dots on it. What are those dots doing there? Says Rashi, this teaches us, according to one interpretation, that he didn't kiss him wholeheartedly. And according to the other interpretation, that he didn't behave as Esav usually did. In this case, he kissed him wholeheartedly, not in the way he would normally be. Suddenly, he was overcome with love and compassion for Yaakov. Either way, the significance of the dots are to soften the meaning of the word. It's not quite, either not quite kissed or not quite Esav. But whichever way, the dots indicate that the word is not quite the way it normally means. But it's not that it uproots the word as though it wasn't there. Certainly, according to Rashi's method, that cannot be what it means, because otherwise, why write it? If it would mean that it's as though the word wasn't there, if it's an erasure, then why write the word at all? Leave out the dots and leave out the word. So what is possible, and here the Rebbe reverts to the earlier Rashi which you quoted before about Lloyd, where Rashi says that the dots over the word uvekumo, that he didn't know when she went to sleep and when she got up. The word uvekumo and when she got up has dots over them, which indicates that he did know when she got up. So over there it seems that the word is uprooted as though it wasn't there because he did know. So the Rebbe, no. Surely that cannot be the case, because if Lloyd really knew that his daughter had just gotten up from next to him, then how were they able to employ the same stratagem the following night? They would know that he knew that this is what they had done the night before. That's why Rashi says that Lloyd knew when she got up from next to him, but she did not know that Lloyd knew. In other words, the position of the word bekumo is kind of uprooted from its place. Instead of referring to Lloyd, it refers to the daughter, who is mentioned earlier and later, but it's not in its place when it's talking about Lloyd. That's the meaning of the nekuda. So therefore, we understand that in our case, being that the letters Aleph, Yud, Vov in the word Elov, Ayoy, are dotted, that indicates that the question that they asked of Soras about Avram, Ayoy, where is he, was not as firm as the question which they asked Avram, where is she? And now, said the Rebbe, we can explain why it was necessary to dot the three letters when all you needed to dot is the one letter Lamed, and then we would expound the three letters which spell the word Ayoy, where is he? Now we understand why, because Rashi wants to point out that if there was a question here which was not fully asked, it was perhaps hinted, it was said in an undertone. However, it was not a fully asked question. Which question was that? It was the question that they asked Soras about Avram. Ayoy, where's he? In what sense is it a softened question? Why is it softened? Said the Rebbe, since we're talking about the fact that they're making a point of Soras' modesty, so they want to bring out that she's modest. So at the same time, they're going to engage her in conversation and ask her about her husband. So therefore, Rashi said that question, which they asked Soras about her husband, was in a way of tznius, of modesty, and that's why the three letters Aleph, Yud, Vov are dotted. Accordingly, we understand that when Rashi brings from Bava Metzia that they inquired about her in order to make a point of her modesty, not only does it not conflict with the earlier comment that they inquired of Avram about her and about him, On the contrary, specifically through the this comment that she was the Tnua, she was modest, that explains the dotting on the three letters Aleph Yud Vav in the word Elov. Now, why does Rashi point out that this comment about her modesty is written in Bava Metzia? Why is the reference important? Says the Rebbe, because in Bava Metzia, as Rashi says, Oimrim, they say, it's not just the opinion of one Tana, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, but everybody agrees. Not only the one who argues on Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, everybody agrees. Even Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar would agree that they wanted to make a point of her modesty, and that's why the letters Aleph Yud Vav are dotted, as Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar said. But that comment that they wanted to make a point of her modesty is not sufficient by itself, because we know already from earlier, from the beginning of Parshas Lech Lecha, where Avram and Soras are going down to Mitzrayim, and Avram Avinu makes the point that Soras had hidden her beauty until then, so we know already that Soras was a Tnua, she was modest. And the Malachim knew that Avram knew. So what's the point of stressing it now? So surely you'll have to say that he only wants to arouse Avram Avinu to the fact which he knew already, that she is a tznuah, an additional endearment. That's a little weak. And therefore Rashi adds that the Malachim inquired about her in order to stand a kois shel brocha. But that reason about the kois shel brocha is also insufficient, because since they knew where she was, as Rashi says, so they didn't have to ask, where is she, in order to send her a kois shel brocha. That's why Rashi says that the fact that they asked in a lengthy, wordy way, Ayei Sora Ishtecho, was in order to provoke the answer, to elicit the answer from Avram, she is in the tent. And that way they would bring out her modesty. Another advantage, said the Rebbe, in the interpretation that they wanted to send her a kois shel brocha, over the interpretation that they wanted to make a point of her modesty. If they want to stress her modesty, not important where she is. What's important is where she's not. She's not parading out in the open. But they're asking where she is. And that is only understood if they want to send her the kois shel brocha. There, it's important where she is. Now, why did the Malachim in fact send Torah a kois shel brocha from their kois shel brocha and not from Avram's, which the Rebbe asked before? Says the Rebbe, that's simple. All the time we find that Avram Avinu is standing over them, he's serving them, he's not eating at all. If he's not eating, there is no kois shel brocha from Avram. So they send her their kois shel brocha. And that explains why there's nothing immodest about their sharing the cup, the kois shel brocha with her, because that's the only kois shel brocha that there is. And in fact, they didn't bring it to her, they sent it to her through a messenger. And now we come to the next level of interpretation. Until now, we're talking about pshat. Now we come to the issue of why specifically does Rashi name the authors of the statements. First, Reb Shimon ben Elazar, who says that it's etiquette to inquire of the host and the hostess about each other, and Reb Yosi bar Chanina, who says that they wanted to send a koishal brocha. Why is it important to know the names? Says the Rebbe, a sharp student, in the Rebbe's language, a salty student, a seasoned student, might still be bothered by the fact that they send the koishal brocha to Soras. That doesn't seem all that modest. And why would Soras accept the koishal brocha from strangers? Therefore, says Rashi, you know who said this statement about the koishal brocha? It was Rabbi Yosi bar Chanina. Rabbi Yosi bar Chanina says elsewhere in Mistach Brochas that a woman has a sharper eye to recognize the character of her guests more than a man. So accordingly, we would understand that Soras would have recognized that these are no ordinary strangers, guests in her home. There's something special about them. And therefore, it was okay for her to accept the koishal brocha from them, because these people are somewhat angelic, even though she doesn't realize that they're actually angels. So it's okay to accept their koishal brocha. After all, said the Rebbe, we still need explanation. We now understand why these three interpretations of Rashi do not conflict, but they're all separate interpretations. So why does Rashi write them all in one flow? Says the Rebbe, Rashi writes it in one flow because these three explanations, each one serves to explain why another one of the three guests asked Avram, where is Soras? That's the plural, Vayeimru Elov. They said to Avram, where is Soras? What did they say? Each one had another point. So each interpretation of Rashi of what they wanted to ask about was corresponds to one of the three malachim who asked the question. One malach is sufficient to send the koishal brocha, and one could ask, how is Soras? And the third one could make the point about her tznius. So all three explain the three different guests asking, where is Soras? Now, why does Rashi bring the name Reb Shimon ben Elazar as the author of the statement that it is proper to inquire of the host about the hostess and the hostess about the host? And why is it important that Reb Shimon ben Elazar taught the rule about dotted letters when the majority of the letters are dotted, expound the dotted ones. When the majority are undotted, expound the undotted ones. Why is it important that it was Reb Shimon ben Elazar who taught that? Says the Rebbe, when you have these dotted letters, it doesn't mean to negate the normal pshat meaning of the letters, but it comes to teach you that there's something additional to be learned. In our case, so we have two meanings of these three letters, Aleph Yud Vav. On the one hand, they're part of the word Elov. They're talking to Avram about Sorah. On the other hand, they're teaching us as though they were a word on their own, Aleph Yud Vov Ayoy, where is he? Those three letters are teaching us that they're inquiring of Sorah about Avraham, as though that was a word in itself. So a seasoned student might ask, does it make sense that you'll have a majority of dotted letters, that they should be secondary to the one letter of the word which is not dotted, and they are the letters that are expounded? Even while they form three letters out of a word of which they are part? So Rashi answers that question by saying, you know who taught this rule about dotted letters? Reb Shimon ben Elazar. And Reb Shimon ben Elazar has elsewhere the policy that you can sometimes have a majority which is serving the minority. Where is that? There's a din like this. You're not allowed to bake on Yom Tov for after Yom Tov. So you're not allowed to cook more than you need for the Yom Tov. Nevertheless, said Reb Shimon ben Elazar, a woman may fill an entire oven with bread. And the way the ovens used to work was there was a heat source at the bottom. The oven is made of clay. The heat rises up, and the dough was plastered to the sides of the oven. The more full the oven was, the more evenly the bread baked. If you had just one loaf in the oven, it wouldn't bake well. And therefore, says Reb Shimon ben Elazar, the woman is allowed to bake bread on Yom Tov, a full oven of loaves of bread. She only needs one for Yom Tov. So why is she allowed to bake all the rest? Because all the rest serve this one loaf of bread that each should get baked better. So for the sake of the Yom Tov loaf, she needs to bake all the rest. Likewise, over here, we indeed have three letters, but they become secondary to the letter Lamed in the word Elov. And from here, the Rebbe proceeds to teach a lesson, Yena Shel Torah, the wine of Torah, the deeper dimension of Torah, which is the teaching of Hasidus. The lesson is like this. Sometimes a person can calculate, where's my day going? Where's my time going? The time that I actually spend as a Jew on Torah, davening, mitzvahs, is a small minority of the day. Most of the time goes on the needs of the body, eating, sleeping, earning a living. That takes up the overwhelming majority of my day. So he can become despondent. There's such a great vacuum in his life. And for this is the lesson that we learn from Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, that if the things that one does, like eating, sleeping, earning, are done l'shem shamayim, for Hashem's sake, they are no longer ordinary things. They're no longer mundane. They become a part of the Torah and the mitzvahs which the person does, that is facilitated by his eating and drinking and earning. Just like the majority of the loaves in that oven become secondary and they serve, and they're part of the process of the one Yom Tov loaf. So too does this majority of the day, which a person spends facilitating the minority of the time that he spends on Torah mitzvahs, they too become like that minority of the time. They too are considered part of his avodas Hashem. So no need to be despondent. The Rebbe points out that Torah is also called bread, and the baking of the bread that we're talking about is also an allusion to the baking of the bread of Torah. Torah has to be baked with the heat of the love of Hashem. When one does that, then, as the Rambam puts it, then if one loves Hashem and serves him out of love, then he's constantly serving him, even when he's dealing in his business, even when he's sleeping. His sleep is a way of serving Hashem, which is, of course, the point of all of creation, to make for Hashem a dwelling place below. So this person is making a dwelling place for Hashem in the lowest of the below while he's sleeping. And the Rebbe concludes with a bracha that this kind of baking should become a preparation for the time of Moshiach, when the Gemara says that the earth of Eretz Yisrael will produce ready-made food, and we won't even need the baking process. May it happen very speedily through Mashiach Tzidkenu.